Welcome back to Just Your Average Joel podcast. Joel's an ordinary guy who had an extraordinary experience, and I give you Joel.
Thank you, Jennifer. We were talking last week about the spiritual experience, and I kind of want to clarify some of the things that have happened in my life, the spiritual experience that I had, and what that, when I look back, because we had talked about, Jen and I had talked about it, and we said, I had the spiritual awakening, and then it was like, and I think it's a misnomer, or people think this, that, okay, you have a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience, and therefore now there's no problems, you're connected spiritually, and you just like, I don't know, grow wings out your back or something and fly around for the rest of your life. Which is so not true. What happened in that spiritual way, I was watching something with C.S. Lewis last night, actually, and he was talking about, and we talk about in AA, they talk about the adventures before and after, and he talks about his experience of coming to God, experiencing God, and then his life after God, after that experience. And for me, it's always been a backstop. It's always been, I would say, in that spiritual experience too. And this is what happens, what the program is supposed to induce. We were talking about it in the meeting the other week about, of the educational variety. And what the goal is to have a spiritual experience, a bright light experience, whether elongated or in that moment. And what happened in that moment for me, a lot of it, I'd say, is God revealing his nature to me, the nature of God. So once you kind of like have the nature of God, things fit. Certain things fit. It's a lot clearer in your life because now this doesn't really fit here. This isn't of God. This isn't how God would be. And that happens through your experience through the 12 steps as well. And it's weird because we go to meetings, right? We go to these places and we got people with many years, I'm talking 40, 50 years of sobriety, who they have what my good friend Pat said to me years ago. He said, a lot of people know the lyrics, but few know the melody. And they don't know the experience. They have it. They have the verbiage, and they talk about it, and they kind of express, but they lack the importance of certain things, like the power of God, probably being the biggest one. It's like they're doing it. They have the action. They are, we talk about the essential psychic change and that transformation that has to happen. So for me, yes, I had that experience. I was connected. I fell off after that. I become disconnected. It's a lot like, and Jen talks about this quite a bit about, who is it, DeMello? Anthony DeMello. And Anthony DeMello talks about, there's a book called
Awakening.
Or Awareness.
Awareness.
Right?
Yeah.
Awareness.
Yeah.
And awareness, and that book is, and he goes through that, and he says in it, he says, I went through, after I made contact with God and a spiritual experience and awakening like that, I had things happen. I had dips in my emotional, I had problems, I had things happen, but it was different. And I feel like since that time, it's been different. I've known there's something out there. I've known there's a backstop in my life. I know that things are only going to go so far. And a big part of it is they're only going to go as far as I allow them. A lot of people, they have this, it's a very weird thing in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like, it sounds like humility when I say, thank God for all you people. We stand on the shoulders of giants. They got all these ones. They give credit to credit where credit really doesn't belong. If there's one who has all power, like they say, right, then he's got all the power. And that's where all the glory goes, and that's where all the credit should go. But it seems to be, it's the people, it's this, it's that. It's almost to where people feel like, there's another saying, right? The one, you are right where you're supposed to be. And I'm not, I guess they could say I take issue with it, but I'm right where I want to be. The nature of God and a loving God, God wants me to be as close as he can to me. The problem is, and Pat said this to me many years ago when I first started, he says, the only one holding up this thing is you. You can keep God out or you can let God in. And most people, I get, don't want to leave. The only reason why I let God in suddenly like that is because I died. Like, what's its name? The new set of glasses?
Chuck C.
Chuck C. And he laughs. He goes, I died of alcoholism. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't really from virtue. It was circumstance. I had come to a place in my life that I had completely, and couldn't put sentences together. I completely, myself, my internal self, my ego self collapsed. And it was almost like a spiritual, the paddles they put on your body for physical, to wake you up physically. Well, that's kind of like what happened to me spiritually. It was like I was dead, completely dead inside, and boom, God. And I really had that moment where I realized where life was. I realized life was on the inside, not on the outside. And because I was completely dead. So it was very, I would say, because of the spiritual awakening and it being that clear, and there was some clarity. And I think it helps me communicate it. But what does it say? The Tao that can be explained's not the Tao. It's also the steps that can be done without God aren't the steps. I'm just telling you, you can't. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous, laid out how it's laid out, requires you to have an essential psychic change. And what they're really, the production, the end game of it is to give you the gift of the Holy Spirit. Where you're walking around, you have something within you. It talks about the vital, in the 10th step in the program, in the big book, talks about the vital sixth sense. So vital, they got words like essential, vital. These are glossed over by many, right? Glossed over. You don't really need that. Just do this. No wonder people are leaving disappointed. No wonder, because people aren't telling them, listen, you're going to have a bright light. So talks about in the 42 stories, right, Jen? Where 42 stories in their own viewpoint, and in their own language, how they established their relationship with God. This is about a relationship. This is about transformation. This is about, and it comes from a big part of it. And what we do want to talk about a little bit is the responsibility, and how responsibility and spirituality are synonymous. And it seems that most people, it's like weird. It's like they blame time. They blame all kinds of things. It's going to take time. Well, no, not in God's world. You could have it tomorrow. The truth of the matter is you're not willing to. Christ, when he goes to the one guy who had all the stuff and riches and stuff, and he says, come walk with me. Now, I'm pretty sure that guy would have walked into a nice little spiritual spot if he had just willing to give up everything and walk with Christ, but he wasn't. He goes, the man walked away sad. It was an example of, if I told everybody, listen, leave everything you have, go out that and leave and start going down a road for God, most people ain't leaving. They're all going to sit there. So, of course, the experiences are going to be there. So it is, so I'm right where I want to be. If I'm not doing well, it's not anybody else's fault. It's not God's fault. That God gets blamed the most too. They really like to blame God because, it's like, well, I'm waiting on, God willing, I'll be sober. God's always well. What, God wouldn't be willing for me to be sober? Are you willing? Are you willing to do certain things? Are you willing to make decisions? It's weird. We're in that meeting. We're going through we agnostics. And right, how do you think about that? Like, we're going through we agnostics, and the one guy's going, well, we're just in we agnostics, and I don't really try to convince them. I'm like, we agnostics, that whole chapter is to convince you to not be agnostic, just so you know. That's what the whole chapter's about. It's to tell, and they give so many examples. In one point, it says I had to throw away lifelong ideas, conceptions. I had to throw them out. Then it goes into another spot where it says, what are some of the other ones that says, oh, God either is everything or he is nothing. What is your choice to be? This is like stuff it says. And then at the very end of it talks about a guy who has this experience like me, a bright light experience, who gets connected to God in a bright light in a moment. And it's like from bridge to shore. He's like, I felt and it talks a lot about, and this is something that they don't talk about, consciousness. The consciousness in Alcoholics Anonymous. They always talk about like this, that, these people, thank God for you, all this, but the state of consciousness. And then even when they say there's a spot in there where it talks about they'll always say what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now. And that's not what it says. It says what you used to be like, what happened, and what you are like now. And that's the whole thing. That is like what C.S. Lewis is talking about. The time before that, the time that what happened, my spiritual awakening, and my life after my spiritual awakening. And he was, you can definitely be too smart for Alcoholics Anonymous, just so you know, and the steps and coming to God. Probably can't be too dumb, probably can't be too crazy, which, I was pushing that one, right? I was out there on the crazy end. But most people are too smart and too, what did you say today? Too hopeful or too
well.
Too well. They're just not hit those places where they're at a point where it's like, okay, I'm willing to go down this road. I'm willing to accept whatever, whatever path, at this point, but there's all this debating and maybe I can do this and let me do that. And if you go to a meeting, and this is just by my experience in this area, it could be different in some other places, but I've been in other places too. But you wouldn't hear much of that in a meeting. You're not going to hear a lot of. You're going to hear a lot of opinion. You're going to hear a lot of,
personalities.
And what they refer to a lot, other people, groups, meeting makers make it. They really feel like, what'd that girl say that time? She says, you guys act like you know better than God. Like you're nicer than God. So you're going to soften the blow for these people. Like you're nicer than God. God is too harsh that you're going to soften the blow. So, you don't really have to believe and you don't have to do this and you don't have to do that. Just come, we're going to hang out and we'll love you until you can love yourself. Just complete and total bullshit. Oh, that's crazy shit. That is stuff that keeps people. I don't even know what the percentage of what people are getting sober now, but it's not good. And what people are there are people like me and Jen. What kind of people are there? Are they people that actually need to have a God? Do they need to have an essential psychic change? Do they need to be transformed? I'm not so sure, especially when some of them have skated for many years, like decades. And their message is basically people, and the program that the people in the program keep them sober. Not about relationship.
The girl literally said it. The saying is, I have a God-shaped hole. The girl said the other night, I have an AA-shaped hole. And AA filled that. So that's how far that's come. The God-shaped hole is now an AA-shaped hole.
Exactly. And AA is just like Bruce Lee said, it's a finger. It's pointing to the moon. He slaps the thing. It's just a tool. The whole object of the whole program is to bring you to God. So therefore, you're transformed. You can go out into the world and you can be a certain person. It's like we intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. How does this intuitive thing, how does this thing take over? How does this consciousness come about? Well, it's through the deflation of ego and the death of self and the giving up these other things. There's a big thing going on now, right? The one people are sharing about. It's about subtraction, and I'm not even so sure that some of them know what they mean, but I remember almost 30 years ago, I remember Pat looking at me and said, I'm so grateful for all the things that I've lost. And he was like a wordsmith. He would use words to kind of get your mind thinking about it. And he was like, I'm so grateful for all the things I've lost. And what he was talking about is pride, his gluttony, his greed, things that God had taken away from him that causes me to be separated from God. And when I'm separated from God, I do stupid things. And I don't see the world right. I'm not clear. I get into a lot of problems. And that choice is yours. That choice is yours. Do I want to give this up? I think a lot of us aren't sold on the fact that God loves us more than we love ourselves. Like we know better than God. I don't trust God all that much. You know what I mean? Somebody shared it the other day, right? They were like, I trusted God with alcohol and, a few things, but not my kids. not basically their whole life.
Say, no romance or finance, because God doesn't know how things work in those areas. So those I'll keep control of.
Exactly.
A big joke, but big problem for a lot of alcoholics, actually, what leads a lot of them back to drinking. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and those are the relationship, like a sexual relationship. One thing about sexual is the one that all your character defects will start firing.
Like
so if you're not
grow on your character defects.
Exactly. So if you're not grounded and have a relationship, because as grounded as you think you might be, I had that spiritual way like it was, and I'm just telling you, there with God for days, gave it up, and I over my sobriety have gotten connected again, formally walked through the steps, got connected again, got spiritually connected, have the experiences that they talk about in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. All those experiences got back connected spiritually. And guess what I did? I saw some girl, boom, next thing you know, I'm over here. Shiny, it's over here. And then I traded that in. So there'd be times that that's been kind of my experience. Like alcohol, it's weird. People all talk about like spirituality is ahead of you. You're getting better and better. Listen, it's side by side. It's a thing where I'm either close to God or I'm far away from God. And that all matters to where I want to be in my life. If I want to be close to God, I'm close to God. If I'm not, I'm not. And that's not a time thing. You know, I think over time, possibly, I find it's a little better being close to God than it isn't. You know what I'm saying? I the hurting of that, but I'm responsible for that. They talk a lot about that. I talk about a lot in. I had a little thing here too, where it said about responsibility. If there is one who has all power, if that's really true, that's what it says. There is one who has all power. It says it again, the 10th step. It says a lot has been said about the one who has all power and knowledge. And then it's talking about being effective. How am I going to be effective? Now that I've been connected, now that I'm connected spiritually, how am I going to be effective in the world? How am I going to bring this vision into my daily living? How am I going to be, and that's something that has to be a part of it has to be a consciousness. And they talk about that in the 11th step, right, Jen? They talk about a lot about what was an occasional hunch becomes a working part of the mind. But in this here, I got, what does it say? Responsibility. Really, you have saved my life. We stood on the shoulders of giants. Bill and Bob started AA, there's one guy, he can't break from that. I shared, he says it, and I'm like, listen, if it wasn't Bill or Bob, I think we said it last week, right?
It'd be Bert and Ernie.
It could have been Bert and Ernie. It wouldn't have mattered. The most important,
not the guys.
Exactly, the most important ingredient in the whole thing is God. Yeah. Most important ingredient. Yeah. And it's funny how they talk about God and how people talk about God in the program now. The guys get done, right? You get to the whole end of the book, basically, where it goes into 164, and it goes, well, we realize we know only a little. It says, ask God in your morning meditation what you can do for the man who still suffers. He will determine those things. They're always talking about going to God. They don't know. I mean, we're talking about the guys that wrote the book are like saying, hey, we realize we know only a little. Now, you would think that book has all the knowledge that you'll ever need for which it does if it hooks you into God. Which the book leads you into God. The book don't have that much information. I mean, it constantly says the same thing. It says, you're the problem and God's the solution. That's what the book says over and over and over in many different ways. So we go into here, Bill and Bob started thank people countless ways for their spiritual life, sponsors, books, pure grace without any personal. This is another one that's a big thing that happens. They say, I'm sober by the grace of God. I don't know why he chose me. Now listen, your spiritual walk's not going to be that good if you think that you were struck sober and my brother who died, a heroin addict, was just, God said, F you, basically. Let him die. There's a choice. Grace falls on the just and the unjust. Grace is pouring down. Remember when we said that thing years ago? Yeah. The guy said, grace is pouring down everywhere, and I'm walking around with an umbrella. Okay, so the 12 steps are the process of you taking that umbrella and putting it away so you can experience the grace of God. So it's through faith, because the saying comes from the Bible, it's through faith by grace I'm saved. If I don't believe the faith, if there's this power out there, there's no power. If I believe, if I believe it, it's true. If I don't believe it, it's true. It's true to me. But is my life going to be transformed? And that's my responsibility to do that. It's my responsibility to take and say, listen, I don't know, I can't manage, and I'm going to put the umbrella down, and I'm going to allow that grace to come into my life and transform my life. So a lot of, in all situations, they got in the 10th step, spiritual axiom. When there's a problem, okay, first you got to get undisturbed. But when you're disturbed, it says, when you're disturbed, the problem lies with you. And that gets into like Course in Miracles. Back to responsibility again. Course in Miracles goes into a lot of, you're responsible for what you see. Pat used to say that all the time. I'm the one who makes up and I get into a jam and he'd say, listen, man, you just gotta stop making shit up. Because you're the one that gets to say that you're doing this to me, you're making me feel this way. It's the end all is all with you. Now, I might need the power of God to shift my sight or to see it differently, which is usually the case. I got to say, I'm seeing it wrong. I'm disturbed. If I'm disturbed, that means I'm not connected spiritually, because when I could go refer back to that spiritual experience I had, that awakening. Trust me when I tell you, life was exactly the same, just like, what's his name said? Chuck C. Same wife, same life, same everything. different set of eyes. Everything was the same. In fact, I was still walking. I don't think I had a car at the time. I was walking down the street and I was the happiest man on the planet. I was tingling. My bottom of my feet were tingling. I mean, I was happy from head to toe. Never experienced happiness for no reason at all. Okay. That's my spirit. That's a spiritual. That's true. When he says we believe that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. That's true emotion. All this other crap is made up by me. So everything outside being happy, joyous, and free is made up by Joel. So why am I unhappy? Why am I not free? Why am I? It's because of me. Never because of God. Never. It always means that I have what the spiritual axiom of the 10th step, that I'm having a problem spiritually. And you can get people to agree. You know, you get 5 people, 10 people agree, you know, that guy's an asshole. You know what I mean? You can get a bunch of people to agree to a lot of stuff, but that's not going to get me over my problem. That's not going to get me back connected. How I'm seeing it is wrong, and I need to get back connected. And so responsibility is like everything in a spiritual walk, because it's how I'm doing in my condition. It's not leaving it up to other people. It's getting out of being a victim too. You know, that my spiritual condition is contingent upon what? Some outside force. It's out there somewhere. I guess they feel like it's not humble to say, I'm lacking humility when I say, listen, I'm responsible for what's going on. And God's not the one that's the blame on this. It's not, I'm waiting for God. No, you're waiting on you to be able to get to a place of surrender. And I hate to say it, but it's very true when they get into the step book. There's a step book, and they elongate with 6 and 7, because the elongated version is, you know, you tend to say, well, you know, I'm doing okay. I don't really need to surrender this. You know what I mean? Or I'm having fun with this. And, you know, so you ride that character defect for, you know, and there lies until you're at a point where you're disconnected spiritually, you're dying on the inside, here I am, separated myself through pride, gluttony, greed, lust, whatever it is, and now it's all of a sudden it's like, okay, God, please take this thing that was, sin is fun for a season, whatever, starts out great. What do you say about that? It starts out like honey.
A bad habit starts off tasting like honey and ends up tasting like poison. A good habit starts off tasting like poison, but ends up tasting like honey.
Exactly. And that's a lot of times how it's been in my life. Well, it starts out great, and then all of a sudden it's like,
until it isn't.
And now it's not, right? And now I'm
fun
going
until it isn't.
Yeah. And what has happened, it's funny. I'm connecting to the outside world. This is another thing. I'm always grabbing onto the outside world, right? When I do that and I cling to that, I start dying on the inside. There is no hooking into my security and my life, and my spiritual connection is an inside thing. I need to take care of this and where I am at inside, not on the outside. Every time I start resting, and boy, is it so easy, right? That's why you were talking about last week, right? You were talking about how they were doing better. The guys that went off to World War II, this is in the step book now, so because the people are like, well, how did they write that? Well, because the step book was after World War II. It was 18 years later or whatever it was. And they talked about guys who were having better success rates in sobriety, and they were in the World War II than guys back at home. Well, what happens back at home? It's like, you know, I remember I was seeing a girl years ago, and it was like, I wasn't even going to meetings. I was like, well, you go. And then we come home. It's like Chinese. It was like, you know, order out. They go there. We come home. We do a topic. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's so easy to get into a place where you're just resting on your laurels. It's easier for me to reach out and grab this and that than to actually have character and have humility and give up and surrender sometimes. And so that's part of the walk too, as far as, and I'm responsible for that. Not anybody else, not my sponsor. You hear people like, if they sound like if their sponsor died, you might as well just bring them to the morgue with them, you know, because that's the end of their spiritual connection. That's not the idea of a sponsorship. Wasn't the intent, right?
Nope.
In the beginning, Jen knows a lot about that, and we'll get into that. You know, how these guys were. These guys were supposed to you're supposed to put your hand in God. I remember a guy sharing this. It was so great back in the day. He says that the object of a sponsor is to become unnecessary. You should be very unnecessary, especially this guy's 30 years, 35. That you would act like any decision they make. I remember they were leaving somewhere, and in the interim, he was going away for like 2 weeks. In the interim, the person was sober for many years. He wanted her to get a temporary sponsor. for that period of time, I'm thinking, really? That's not has anything to do with the program Alcoholics Anonymous. That has nothing to do with it at all whatsoever. That's like the antithesis of that. That's like the anti-program, And there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of, and I'm just telling you, it is mainstream, and that is like our world today. Things that are crazy that don't make any sense, right, Jen? Are mainstream. Like, we're having discussions about things we shouldn't even be having discussions about. We got topics and things that are happening that we're fighting against, or this one's saying that. It's like, really? And it's like a legitimate thing. Probably 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, if it was brought up, it would be like, this is crazy. Who's this nut talking about this? No, this is not mainstream conversations now. So that's a lot what's going on in AA, a lot. And it's like, I would say there's the people that are connected to God, have had a spiritual awakening, and have had, and the people that haven't. And what do you think that percentage is? I don't even know that there's many. There's a lot of people that haven't had the experience. Yeah. A lot. And the program really lays it out, how to have it. Because we read it last week in We Agnostics. At the end of We Agnostics, the guy's thing there, he says, whether this experience, because he lays out having a spiritual experience like mine, where he was transformed. He says, whether slowly or of the educational variety, this is the result. They act like that's not the result, that the result isn't a bam, like, holy crap, God is doing for me what I can't do for myself. These are things that are said, that I'm in a different realm. My consciousness has shifted, and the credit goes to God. So that's where on that. Some of the history. What was some of the history about? How did they treat those people back then? I mean, as far as what you know more about it than I do.
Treat
sure.
What people? I don't
like
know
like other people that came in. How'd they sponsor them? What'd they do? What was their?
No, I don't know. I mean, when it started, it was the Oxford group. Really, sponsorship isn't talked about in the book. So right. I don't know when that entered, to tell you the truth. I have no idea when that entered.
It's more like the step book. The step book with Bill. Bill was a salesman. Yeah. Big of watering things down. Big tent. Yeah. Big tent. Like, hey, listen, let's get everybody in here. Everybody should be sober. And and then you got the people in there that are, like I said, ex-problem drinkers possibly, or whatever. There's more of them than there are of the others. So they have the narrative. They have the actual talk. They're the ones. We're in Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous base that talks about that book is for last skip, like myself, low bottom guys, that it says on page 25, and I shared it last week, that no middle of the road solution. Entered into a region which there is no return through human aid. Okay, pretty definitive, right? And you got people, it's all about human aid. There's all about human aid. That people are gonna help, and that they are gonna fix themselves. Because if you do the steps, you're gonna find out when you get to certain parts in the steps that you can't do these steps without God. And I can say right out of the beginning, I could say right away, it's like that. So anyway. But you have nothing to say about the beginnings of the...
No, I really don't know when sponsorship... all I can tell you is in the early times in the Oxford group, it was more about prayer, meditation, and God. They didn't have a book. They didn't talk about sponsors. Meetings were optional. Prayer and meditation were the heart of the program. The transformation, being reborn, was the heart of the program. Where that changed, I'll have to look it up, honestly, and let you know. But today it is definitely more about the book, the sponsor, the meetings, and not much. It's a lot more about personalities than principles, where early AA, I'd say, was more about transformation, being reborn, prayer, meditation, and God. Where that changed is a good question. I'll have to look it up and have an answer for you next week.
There you go. The other thing is, it's funny because you get into... Okay, so here are the two founders. Okay, so this is the difference in how they were back then, just so you know, in certain areas. First of all, Bob talks about, so the two founders are Bob and Bill. Bob was a doctor, right? Bill was a Wall Street guy who fell off and whatever. They got together, and some of their stuff was, it's funny how he talks about in this. He says, if you think you're atheists or agnostics, or skeptic, or some form of intellectual pride, I feel sorry for you. If you think that, okay, so he goes on to this. He's got 10 pages. So Bob in his story. Then at the end of his story, he says, your heavenly Father will never let you down. Okay, I mean, the guy's got 10 pages. Obviously that's what he believed. He felt like it was important enough to put it in there. But here's Bill when he talks to alcohol. So there's always this thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you go to any of the meetings, you'll go in there and you'll see the guy that's sitting in a bed, and that's alcoholic number 3, right? Jen?
Yeah, Bill D. Sorry. Yep.
Bill D.
Bill Dobson. Yep.
Yeah, so that's Bill D. That picture's in like a lot of rooms. Okay,
Yep.
They go and show that. So here's what Bill says to him. This is like crazy, right? So alcoholic number 3rd guy, he says to him, he says to his wife first, he says, I remember, he says, I'm not great at reading stuff. Here, why don't you read that? Can you do that for me, honey? Where it says Bill and Henrietta. First he says it to him, and then he repeats it back at the bottom.
Henrietta, the Lord has been so wonderful to curing me of this terrible disease that I just want to keep talking about it and telling people. I think I have the answer. Bill was very grateful that he had been released from this terrible thing and had given God the credit for having done it, and he's so grateful about it he wants to tell other people. That sentence, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease that I want to keep telling people about it, has been a sort of golden test for the AA program and for me. Of course, as time went on, I began to get my health back, and I began... Do you want me to?
No, that's
okay.
just that important. I just want to make the point about the Lord and how he's talking to he's talking to a brand newcomer about the Lord. I mean, people's head would blow right off their shoulders. If you'd done that now, their head would just explode. They couldn't imagine. This is how the stuff started. And he said that to his wife, and then he said it to him. And that is the 12 step of Alcoholics Anonymous. See, people talk about 12 step. I work with, they drill down, they see through the prism of their own egos. So every time they look at the book, they see parts where it says nothing will stop you or help an alcoholic to stay away from a drink than intensive work with others and self-sacrifice. That's what they see every time. Somebody like me sees this as the 12 step is, I'm so grateful to God for releasing me and relieving me this, okay, that I've been let out of hell, okay. What do I want to do with that? Just like he said, that's the 12th step. I want to keep telling people about it. That's why I want to do this podcast. That's why I want to bring people down this path. But when everybody else is talking about the path, this other thing. It's not this other thing. This other thing is bullshit. It's going to lead you to a nowhere. It's going to lead you to something that's not true. It's their own perception. It's their own. It's not what the book says. The book says we have clear-cut directions on how we recovered. Well, they're not talking about all this mamby-pamby stuff that they're talking about in meetings. It's not. It's about surrender to a God who loves you, who wants the very best for you and wants to transform your life. If you're not going on that path, it's weird because all the steps, you ask, you seek, and God delivers. If I'm not seeking that or wanting that, how is God going to answer that? If I'm seeking something else, they're not seeking that. They're seeking something else. So of course they're not. How is God going to answer something that you're not even asking for? You're not even asking for this. And so for Bill and Bob, it's essential that people get, listen, if you're going to join the program, it's amazing the lack of curiosity of people that come to AA, the lack of curiosity of the beginning of it. Where did it come from? How did it come about? How is this a certain way? Who were the co-founders? What did they think about this? That's not even relevant these days. They don't talk about it. They don't want to know about it. They just want to know what their sponsor tells them. And the truth of the matter for most people is, and it's not their. It's listen. You can have your own heaven. Your heaven's your heaven. Whatever, which might look like hell to me, but that's your heaven. That's your choice, how you want to live. The truth for most people is they don't want to go down this path. They're not willing to give up themselves to a degree unless they have to survive. And if you come to a place where you get in there and get comfortable for a little bit and you're able to survive without having to do this, right?
Exactly.
Then now I'm in here. I
really
always
locked
say
in.
like the prison, right? I don't know if I shared this before. Did I talk about the prison thing?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, so it's like you go to prison, you go to jail. They put you in the quarantine, so you're in the bubble. Eventually you get left into the pod. You'll be out in the pod. You'll be in general population. Maybe if you're there long enough, you get a trustee. You're roaming around the prison. You might even get work release to come back, but you're still in prison, and that's where they are. They're in prison. They have not broken out through the walls and moved into the spiritual realm. They're still in the physical realm, which is about people, places, and things. That's where their sobriety is. It's all in people, places, things. In very other ways, in magnificent ways, in glorified ways, and all the different ways that they can glorify people, places, and things, but it's still people, places, and things. It's not God. And it's not a real power. It's a somewhat of a power. It's like you get in there, I'm sure once you get in there and you get a little commissary and you got a little more money and you get a nice roomie, you move, you can make everything, you're a lot more comfortable. It's like when you're in the street and then you get sober and now you're in a house, it's a lot better than the house. It's a lot better now I got a little bit of money, stuff like that. Yeah, it seemingly is better, but is there a true transformation? Is there something that's going to be in all situations? Are you going to be a certain person? Are you going to be able to make it through hard times, low spots, high spots, and all that? Is that going to happen? Most likely not. And how whenever that happens for you, that's up to you. But what else were we going to talk about? I had some stuff over here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're in hell, but you're putting up curtains.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Just the recovery rate's gone down too. And I think if you were more direct and you were more honest and you really told the newcomer right from the beginning,
Sure.
AA would be a lot smaller. The success rate would be higher, but a lot of people wouldn't be there. But the real alcoholic would stay because what choice does he have? So, but it'd be a lot more of an honest program, to
Sure.
tell you the truth. So.
Yeah, it's funny because you can't scare those guys away. It's funny they're always catering to the guy that you can get scared away. We're worried about that guy, but you're not really worried about the guy who's really dying over here to a degree of, listen, if you told me you got to believe, if you told me anything, it wouldn't have scared me off. I would have had to stay. Like you just said, I would have had to stay.
Well, and the history of AA is actually pretty amazing. We don't really have time to get into it today, maybe next podcast,
Sure.
but that too. They know the lyrics, they don't know the melody. They tell the history of Bill and Bob, but it's amazing how they met, how they knew each other, these certain essential people knew each other from childhood. It's just such a God
and
story.
One prayed,
it's so
the other
amazing.
one prayed. Yeah, boom,
And the
boom.
ones in Switzerland, ones in New York, ones in Vermont. It will tell it next time, but they miss like you said, it's like chicken soup without the chicken. They miss the main point of the whole thing, and it's just really, really changed the rooms, the experience, all of it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right, I guess like, subscribe, all the things.
All right.
And
we'll see you next week.
See you next week.